Nestled within the archives of the Nevada Historical Society lies a photograph that few have seen with their own eyes, yet many have heard whispered about in the quiet corners of mining towns across the Silver State. Dated September 17, 1883, the sepia-toned image shows 12 men standing proudly before the entrance of the Comstock silver mine in Virginia City. Their faces are etched with the quiet dignity of those who daily descend into the earth's darkness to extract its treasures. Dust-covered clothes, weathered hands, and eyes that have witnessed both fortune and tragedy, they stand as monuments to America's relentless westward expansion. The photograph, taken by traveling documentarian Edward Harrington, was commissioned to commemorate the mine's record production that month. The men are arranged in 2 rows, 6 standing, 6 kneeling, their postures stiff with the formality required by early photographic processes. Their expressions remain stoic, save for a slight upward curve on several lips, perhaps pride in their accomplishments or relief at the temporary reprieve from the suffocating depths below. At first glance, the photograph appears unremarkable, one of thousands documenting America's industrial coming of age. The cave entrance behind them is a dark void, framed by timber supports weathered by mountain winters and the constant moisture of underground springs. But upon closer examination, something unsettling emerges from the shadows. In the darkness of the mine entrance, partially obscured by the timbers, the faint outline of what appears to be a face can be discerned. Not the face of any of the miners, but something gaunt, hollow-eyed, watching the proceedings from the threshold between light and darkness. For decades, this peculiarity went unnoticed, the photograph filed away as merely a record of the mine's operations. It wasn't until 1967, when historian Margaret Winters was digitizing the archives, that the anomaly was discovered. Under the harsh light of her magnifying glass, what had been a shadow revealed itself as something more deliberate. A face with features too distinct to dismiss as pareidolia, yet too unnatural to easily identify as human. The 12 miners in the photograph have names, dutifully recorded in Harrington's journal. Thomas Blackwood, foreman; Joseph Miller, engineer; Samuel Prescott, blaster; and 9 others, ordinary men doing extraordinary work beneath the Nevada mountains. Their descendants still populate towns throughout the region, carrying their legacy and surname and spirit. But the 13th presence in that photograph has no name in the records, no descendants to claim its memory. What makes this photograph particularly disturbing, wrote Winters in her analysis, is not merely the unexpected presence, but the fact that none of the miners appear aware of it. They stand mere feet from this figure, yet their focus remains squarely on the camera, as if the presence behind them existed in a dimension adjacent to, but separate from, their reality. The Nevada Historical Society has since received countless requests to examine the original photograph, most from paranormal enthusiasts and amateur historians. The Society maintains a policy of scholarly access only, citing the fragility of the original print and the need to preserve historical integrity. This restriction has only fueled speculation about what truly lurks in the shadows of that century-old image. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. The stories that can't be explained by science or logic deserve to be preserved and shared with those brave enough to face them. The Comstock silver mine was more than just another hole in the ground. It was the embodiment of America's gilded ambitions. Discovered in 1859, the Comstock lode represented the first major silver deposit found in the United States, triggering a migration that transformed Nevada from barren territory to statehood in just 5 years. By 1883, the year the photograph was taken, Virginia City had evolved from a dusty collection of tents and shacks to a sophisticated metropolis of 30,000 souls, complete with opera houses, international cuisine, and the technological marvel of its day, the Sutro Tunnel, an engineering feat that drained the scalding waters from the mine's depths. But Virginia City's opulence was built upon sacrifice. The mines beneath its streets were hellscapes of heat and danger, where temperatures regularly exceeded 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Men worked in 15-minute shifts, emerging drenched in sweat only to be immediately replaced by the next miner. The air was thick with dust that coated lungs and eventually fossilized them. Cave-ins were common. The earth itself seemed to resist the intrusion of human ambition. Between 1859 and 1883, over 300 men perished in the tunnels below Virginia City. The Comstock devours its children, wrote one local newspaper editor, after a particularly devastating collapse claimed 42 lives in 1875. It gives wealth with one hand while collecting souls with the other. The mine in the photograph, officially designated Comstock Silver Mine No. 7, had its own dark history. Opened in 1878, it was the site of a peculiar incident just 3 months before Harrington arrived with his camera. According to reports in the Territorial Enterprise, Virginia City's newspaper, 3 miners went missing during a routine exploration of a newly discovered chamber. The search party sent to find them returned with reports of unnatural formations and sounds that had no earthly source. The missing men were never found, and the new chamber was sealed with dynamite the following day. Thomas Blackwood, the foreman who stands center in the photograph, wrote in his personal journal, now preserved alongside the photograph, of disturbances in the weeks following the incident. The men speak of voices when none should exist, of lanterns extinguishing without cause, of tools disappearing from one tunnel only to appear in another. I attribute these stories to nerves strained by darkness and the constant danger inherent in our work, yet I cannot entirely dismiss the unease that descends upon me when entering the lower levels. The mine's owner, industrialist William Hearst, father of publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst, ordered operations to continue regardless of the men's concerns. Silver prices were climbing, and the Comstock's production was beginning to wane after years of intensive mining. New veins were precious, new chambers essential to maintaining profitability. Whatever reservations Blackwood harbored, he kept them private, continuing to lead his men into the earth day after day. It's worth noting that Mine No. 7 was distinctive for another reason. It cut deeper into the mountainside than any other operation in the region. Engineers had discovered an unusual geological formation that allowed them to bypass much of the scalding water that plagued other Comstock operations. This meant they could penetrate farther, following the silver veins into virgin territory no human eyes had ever beheld. Local Paiute tribes had long avoided the specific mountain housing Mine No. 7. Their oral histories spoke of a thin place in that particular ridge, where the world of spirits and the world of flesh pressed too closely together. When asked by early settlers why they wouldn't approach the area, tribal elders would only say, "What sleeps there should not be awakened." Such warnings were common throughout the West and typically dismissed by practical-minded prospectors as superstition designed to keep valuable resources in native hands. But as Blackwood's journal entries progressed through 1883, his scientific skepticism began to waver. July 25, 1883. Prescott reports seeing a figure moving in the north tunnel when all men were accounted for above ground. I reprimanded him for drinking before his shift, though in truth he has always been our most reliable man. August 3, 1883. 3 more reports of the watching man, as the crew has taken to calling it. Always at a distance, always retreating when approached. I have doubled the lantern oil ration, thinking poor lighting may be the culprit. September 10, 1883. I saw it myself today. God help me, I saw it watching from the shadows. When I approached, it retreated deeper into the tunnel, moving in a manner I cannot adequately describe. I have told no one. The men need confidence in their leader. 1 week after this entry, Edward Harrington would arrive to take the now infamous photograph, capturing not just the 12 proud miners, but apparently the entity that had been haunting their workdays for months. The winter of 1883 descended upon Virginia City with unusual ferocity. Snow isolated the mountain community for weeks at a time, and temperatures plummeted far below the seasonal average. Inside the mines, however, work continued regardless of surface conditions. The insatiable appetite of eastern markets for silver and the financial obligations of the mine owners ensured that operations never ceased for something as trivial as weather. By December, something had changed in Mine No. 7. Production began to falter, not because the silver veins were depleting, but because the workforce was. Men started disappearing. The first to vanish was Joseph Miller, the engineer who stands second from the right in the photograph. According to witness accounts collected by the Virginia City Sheriff, Miller entered the mine for a routine inspection of support timbers on December 4th and never emerged. The search party found his lantern abandoned at the entrance to the North Tunnel, the same area where the earliest sightings of the watching man had occurred. There were no signs of a cave-in, no evidence of a struggle. Miller, a husband and father of 3, had simply ceased to exist within the confines of the mine. "It is as if the mountain simply decided to keep him," wrote Sarah Miller, his wife, in a letter to her sister in Boston. "The other miners speak in hushed tones around me now, their eyes filled with a fear they dare not articulate. What kind of widow am I, with no body to bury, no certainty of death to begin my grieving?" Before the community could process Miller's disappearance, 2 more miners vanished in similar circumstances. On December 18th, Timothy Walsh and Frederick Chambers entered the East Tunnel to set blasting charges. Their foreman, Thomas Blackwood, reported hearing the expected warning shouts, followed by an unusual silence. When no explosion followed, he led a team to investigate and found the tunnel empty. The charges had been set with professional precision, yet the men responsible had vanished. Like Miller before them, they left behind only their tools and lanterns. When Samuel Prescott disappeared on January 2, 1884, the pattern became impossible to ignore. 4 men, all present in Harrington's photograph, had vanished without trace in the same mine within a single month. The local newspaper, after initially reporting the disappearances as isolated incidents, published a front-page story connecting the cases and noting their unusual nature. "The question that haunts our fair city," wrote editor Michael Davies, "is whether these men have fallen victim to some elaborate criminal enterprise, or if there exists within Mine No. 7 some heretofore unknown natural hazard that leaves no trace of its victims. Neither explanation offers much comfort to the families left behind. I want you to leave a comment below saying what you think happened to these miners. Was it something natural or something beyond our understanding? Your comment might help unlock the mystery that has remained unsolved for over a century." The criminal theory gained traction briefly when it was discovered that the missing men had all purchased shares in a new ventilation system designed by Thomas Blackwood. Some speculated that Blackwood himself might be eliminating partners to increase his own profits. This theory collapsed when Blackwood became the 5th man to disappear on January 15th. His final journal entry, written that morning, consists of a single sentence. "It watches from the shadows, but it no longer retreats when I approach." By February 1884, operations at Mine No. 7 had been suspended indefinitely. The remaining miners refused to enter regardless of financial incentive or threat of termination. William Hearst dispatched his most trusted engineer from San Francisco to investigate the incidents and determine whether the mine could be salvaged. The engineer's preliminary report, preserved in the Hearst family archives, contains a telling observation. The local workforce exhibits an irrational terror specific to Mine No. 7. They will readily enter other operations in the area, suggesting the issue is not a general fear of mining. Something unique to this particular excavation has infected the community with dread. Most disturbing are the consistent reports of a figure seen in the tunnels, described variously as a man, but wrong somehow. I dismiss such superstitious nonsense, of course, but cannot dismiss the very real fact of 5 missing men. Hearst's engineer spent 3 days exploring Mine No. 7 with a team brought in from outside Virginia City. On the 3rd day, the engineer and 2 assistants entered the North Tunnel where Joseph Miller had first disappeared. According to the sole survivor of this expedition, they proceeded approximately half a mile into the mountain when their lanterns simultaneously extinguished, plunging them into absolute darkness. "I heard Simmons scream first, then Crawford," reported James Wilson, the assistant who managed to find his way back to the main shaft. "The sounds they made, I hesitate to describe them as human. There was a quality to their terror that seemed to transcend ordinary fear. Then a silence so complete it felt solid. I called their names, but received no answer. I felt my way along the tunnel wall until I reached the main shaft, where light still penetrated from the entrance." Wilson's account was detailed in his statement to the Virginia City Sheriff, but a different version emerged in private correspondence to his brother in Chicago. "What I told the authorities is true, but incomplete. In the darkness, before the screams, I felt a presence moving among us. The air grew cold in a way that defied the mine's natural heat. And there was a smell, like earth that has been disturbed after centuries of rest. I didn't merely hear my companion's terror, I felt the source of it brush against me in the blackness. I didn't find my way out through luck or memory of the path. I was permitted to leave, Richard, permitted to carry the story back to the surface. I know this with a certainty I cannot explain. By March 1884, mine number 7 was officially closed, and its entrance sealed with dynamite-triggered rockfalls. The official explanation cited structural instability and depleted silver veins. No mention was made in public records of the disappearances or the figure in the tunnels. The families of the missing men received modest settlements from the Hearst operation, contingent upon their silence regarding the unusual circumstances. Virginia City began its slow decline shortly thereafter, its population dwindling as the Comstock lode's richest veins were exhausted. By 1900, fewer than 3,000 people remained, dwelling among the architectural remnants of the boom years. The story of mine number 7 might have faded entirely from history, if not for Edward Harrington's photograph, and the face captured in its shadows. In 1967, when Margaret Winters discovered the anomalous face in Harrington's photograph, the event coincided with America's growing fascination with the paranormal. The counterculture movement had embraced spiritual exploration, and scientific interest in unexplained phenomena was reaching its peak. Winters, however, was no enthusiast of the supernatural. She was a methodical historian determined to separate fact from folklore. Her investigation began with the photograph itself. Using the most advanced image enhancement techniques available at the time, she confirmed that the face was present on the original glass plate negative, not a result of damage or development error. This eliminated the most obvious explanation, that the face was simply an artifact of the photographic process or later degradation. Winters then traced the lineage of the photograph from Harrington's possession to the Nevada Historical Society. The chain of custody was unbroken. The photograph had never been out of proper archival storage where it might have been tampered with. The historical record confirmed that Harrington himself had noted nothing unusual about the image at the time it was taken, suggesting he had not observed the face during the photography session. The scientific explanation would be that a 13th individual was present at the mine entrance, partially concealed in the shadows, and captured inadvertently by Harrington's camera, Winters wrote in her preliminary analysis. However, this raises the question of why this person chose to hide rather than join the formal portrait, and why none of the miners acknowledged this presence. Winters expanded her investigation beyond the photograph to the historical context surrounding it. She traveled to Virginia City, by then a semi-restored tourist destination trading on its Wild West heritage, and gained access to local archives normally closed to the public. There she discovered the newspaper accounts of the disappearances and the subsequent closure of mine number 7. The connection between the photograph and the later tragedies transformed Winters' academic curiosity into something more urgent. She began tracking down descendants of the miners pictured with Harrington. Most families had scattered across the country as Virginia City declined, but Winters was able to locate Thomas Blackwood's granddaughter, Eleanor Blackwood Rivers, living in San Francisco. Rivers possessed her grandfather's journals, which had been passed down as family heirlooms despite their disturbing content. She had never shared them publicly, fearing they would cast doubt on her grandfather's mental stability. When Winters showed her the enhanced photograph with the face clearly visible in the mine entrance, Rivers reportedly went pale. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the man my grandfather wrote about, the one who watched from the shadows." With Rivers' permission, Winters studied the complete journal, including entries made after the photograph was taken. The deterioration of Blackwood's confident penmanship was evident as the entries progressed, his once precise handwriting becoming increasingly erratic. His final entries described dreams in which he found himself walking through the mine tunnels, drawn deeper by a voice that spoke without sound, directly into my thoughts. "It knows each of us now," reads his penultimate entry, dated January 14, 1884, the day before his disappearance. "It learned our faces from Harrington's contraption somehow. I see it more clearly each day. It is ancient beyond reckoning, yet it learns quickly. God forgive me for leading my men into its domain." Winters' investigation took an unexpected turn when she managed to locate James Wilson, the sole survivor of the final expedition into mine number 7. In 1967, Wilson was 94 years old, living in a nursing facility in Portland, Oregon. Despite his advanced age, His recollection of the events in the mine remained vivid. Too vivid, according to the facility staff, who reported that his nightmares about the incident often woke other residents. Wilson agreed to speak with Winters, but refused to look at the photograph when offered. "I don't need to see its face again," he told her. "It's waited patiently in my dreams for decades." According to Winters' notes from the interview, Wilson believed that something had been dwelling in the mountain long before the miners broke through into its domain. He described it as neither ghost nor man, but something that remembered being human once, very long ago. Most disturbing was his conviction that it had not merely taken the missing men, but absorbed them somehow. "It collects," Wilson told Winters. "It takes the essence of a person, their knowledge, their memories. That's why it was so interested in the camera. It had never seen such technology before, and it wanted to understand. By the time it took Blackwood, it had learned enough about us to begin planning something larger." Wilson's claims were impossible to verify, and Winters noted that his advanced age and the trauma of his experience might have affected his reliability as a witness. Nevertheless, she was struck by the consistency between his account and the observations in Blackwood's journal, written 80 years earlier. Winters compiled her findings into a comprehensive report for the Nevada Historical Society, recommending that the original mine site be examined with modern equipment. Her recommendation was denied. The land containing Mine No. 7 had been incorporated into a military testing range during World War II and remained restricted. Whether by coincidence or design, the physical evidence that might have corroborated the historical accounts was inaccessible. Frustrated by institutional constraints, Winters published a limited circulation paper titled "The 13th Subject: An Analysis of Anomalous Presence in Historical Photography." The academic community largely dismissed her work as a curious diversion from serious historical study. The paranormal community, conversely, embraced it too enthusiastically, extrapolating well beyond Winters' careful analysis into sensationalist territory. Caught between skeptical dismissal and credulous exploitation, Winters eventually abandoned her investigation. She returned to conventional historical research until her retirement in 1982. Though colleagues noted that she maintained a peculiar habit throughout her later career, she would never allow herself to be photographed. Margaret Winters' investigation might have remained an obscure academic footnote, if not for developments that began in 1997, when Nevada authorities approved limited archaeological access to former mining sites, including the area surrounding Mine No. 7. The University of Nevada received permission to conduct ground-penetrating radar surveys of the sealed mine entrance as part of a broader study of 19th-century industrial archaeology. Dr. Elaine Carmichael, the geologist leading the survey team, had no knowledge of Winters' earlier work or the photograph that had prompted it. Her interest was purely scientific, mapping the extent of the Comstock-era tunnels to understand their engineering and potential environmental impact. What her team discovered, however, defied conventional geological explanation. The tunnel network is far more extensive than the historical records indicate should be possible, Carmichael noted in her preliminary report. Based on documented mining operations, Mine No. 7 should extend approximately 1.2 miles into the mountainside, with standard branching patterns. Our survey reveals a complex system, reaching nearly 5 miles, with chambers and passages that appear to have been created through processes inconsistent with either human mining techniques or natural cave formation. Most puzzling to Carmichael was the fact that the additional tunnels didn't follow the silver veins, the very reason for the mine's existence. Instead, they branched into areas of solid, minerally worthless rock, creating patterns that served no discernible industrial purpose. When mapped from above, these tunnel systems formed geometric configurations that one team member described as almost linguistic in their precision. It's as if someone, or something, was using the existing mine as a starting point to write something into the mountain itself, Carmichael observed in her private notes, later submitted to the Journal of Archaeological Science. The question becomes not just who could have created these extensions without historical documentation, but why they would expend such enormous effort to do so in complete secrecy. The university's request for physical access to the mine interior was denied by federal authorities, citing safety concerns. The decision came after Carmichael shared her findings with government geologists, who conducted their own survey and promptly classified the results. This official secrecy only fueled academic curiosity, and copies of Carmichael's original survey began circulating among researchers interested in the Comstock's history. One such researcher was Dr. Benjamin Hayes, a cultural anthropologist specializing in folklore surrounding industrial development in the American West. Hayes had encountered references to Margaret Winter's work while researching superstitions among 19th-century mining communities. When he saw Carmichael's tunnel mappings, he made a connection that had eluded others. The tunnel patterns mapped by Carmichael's team bear a striking resemblance to Paiute spiritual symbols documented by ethnographers in the 1890s. Hayes wrote in a 2001 paper published in the Journal of American Folklore. These symbols were associated with what the Paiute called the long dream, a state between life and death where ancestral knowledge could be accessed and preserved. Hayes's observation gained unexpected support from carbon dating performed on mineral samples retrieved from the mine's entrance during Carmichael's survey. The tests revealed that while the visible entrance dated to the 1870s as expected, the material just 10 feet inside the main shaft contained isotope patterns consistent with excavation occurring in multiple distinct periods, some as recently as 1884, others dating back hundreds and even thousands of years. This suggests that mine number 7 was not created by the Comstock operation, but rather discovered by it, Hayes theorized. The miners of 1878 may have simply broken through into a system that had been periodically expanded over centuries by unknown parties. The implications of Hayes's theory were simultaneously academic and unsettling. If correct, it meant that the Comstock miners had unwittingly intruded into a site of profound cultural and perhaps supernatural significance to the indigenous population. The face in Harrington's photograph, the disappearances, and the unusual tunnel patterns might all be connected to something far older than Virginia City's Silver Rush. Hayes's attempts to pursue this line of inquiry were hampered by the same federal restrictions that had blocked Carmichael's team. Additionally, he faced resistance from both academic colleagues who considered the research too speculative and from Native American representatives concerned about exploitation of sacred knowledge. Nevertheless, he continued collecting circumstantial evidence that suggested mine number 7 was not an isolated case. Similar patterns of disappearances and unexplained phenomena occur throughout the mining history of the American West, Hayes documented. Between 1850 and 1920, I've identified 37 instances where miners vanished under circumstances resembling the Virginia City case, all in operations that penetrated beyond expected geological formations, all preceded by reports of watching figures in the tunnels. What elevated Hayes's research beyond academic curiosity was his discovery of a pattern in the timing of these incidents. The disappearances occurred in 30-year cycles, with clusters of cases appearing around 1855, 1885, 1915, and so on. If the pattern held, the next cycle would begin around 2005. Hayes presented his complete findings at a closed symposium at the University of Nevada in 2003, including a bold hypothesis about the nature of what had been encountered in these mines. He proposed that certain geological formations in the western mountains served as conduits for an entity or entities that existed at the threshold of physical reality, something that could perceive humans, but operated according to incomprehensible motivations. What we may be observing, Hayes suggested, is not supernatural in the traditional sense, but a natural phenomenon so far beyond our scientific framework that we interpret it through supernatural narratives. These entities appear to be territorially defensive, but also curious about human activity. They learn through observation and absorption, incorporating human knowledge into their own existence. The most provocative element of Hayes's theory was his interpretation of the tunnel patterns discovered by Carmichael. He believed they represented an evolving form of communication, the entity's attempt to create a physical language through which it could eventually express concepts beyond human comprehension. Each cycle of human contact provided new linguistic and conceptual tools that the entity incorporated into this developing communication system. If this hypothesis is correct, Hayes concluded, then the entity photographed in 1883 may have been at an early stage of understanding human presence. The camera itself, a technology capable of capturing and preserving images, would represent a revelation to such a being, perhaps explaining its apparent interest in being photographed. Each subsequent contact has likely increased its comprehension of our world, while we remain largely ignorant of its nature and capabilities. Hayes's presentation was met with predictable skepticism from the scientific community, but it attracted attention from unexpected quarters. Within months, the military jurisdiction over the Mine No. 7 area was reinforced with additional security measures and expanded boundaries. Hayes himself reported being approached by government representatives who requested all his research materials on the subject, citing national security concerns related to the nearby testing range. Hayes complied with the official request, but had taken the precaution of securing copies of his most significant findings with colleagues at various institutions. He continued his research through these unofficial channels until 2004, when he abruptly resigned his university position and withdrew from academic life entirely. His current whereabouts are unknown, though rumors persist that he leads a private research group continuing his work outside institutional constraints. The last public statement attributed to Hayes was a brief email sent to several colleagues in late 2004. The 30-year cycle is not when it becomes active, it's when it becomes visible. It's watching all the time, learning through our technologies. Every camera is a window through which it observes us, and I believe it's almost ready to communicate directly. On a cold morning in January 2005, exactly 121 years after Thomas Blackwood's disappearance, security alarms were triggered throughout the restricted area containing Mine No. 7. According to records later obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, the perimeter had been breached by an unidentified individual who somehow bypassed multiple security layers without triggering earlier warnings. Security camera footage showed a solitary figure approaching the sealed mine entrance shortly before dawn. The figure moved with deliberate purpose, navigating the terrain as if intimately familiar with it despite decades of change. Most disturbing was the fact that while the cameras recorded the approach, none of the human security personnel noticed the intrusion until automated systems forced their attention to it. It was as if the figure existed in the camera's perception, but somehow outside direct human observation. When security teams reached the mine entrance, they found the heavy concrete seal installed in the 1940s had been opened. Not broken or damaged, opened as if it were designed to do so, despite no such mechanism existing in its construction. The breach extended into the main shaft beyond visual range, and initial sensor readings indicated the tunnel was now clear of the rockfall that had sealed it since 1884. What happened next remains heavily redacted in official documents. We know that a joint scientific and military team entered the mine under the highest security protocols. We know that they established a forward base in the main shaft and spent 17 days conducting some form of investigation or operation within the deeper tunnels. We know that on the 18th day, all communication with the team abruptly ceased, followed by seismic activity registering 4.7 on the Richter scale centered precisely on Mine No. 7. When a second team was dispatched to determine what had happened, they found the entrance once again sealed, not by human means, but by a cave-in that geological experts later determined could not have been caused by the recorded seismic activity. The first team, consisting of 23 specialists, was declared lost in a training accident. Their names have never been released. Public access to information about these events might have remained completely restricted if not for the actions of one participant, Dr. Elaine Carmichael, the geologist whose ground-penetrating radar had mapped the anomalous tunnel system years earlier. Carmichael had been recruited as a consultant for the operation due to her familiarity with the mine's unusual structure. She was not part of the team that entered the deeper tunnels, instead remaining at the forward base to analyze data as it was collected. In 2010, 5 years after the incident and suffering from terminal cancer, Carmichael arranged for a sealed document to be delivered to the University of Nevada archives upon her death, with instructions that it remain closed until 2030. Through either error or deliberate action by a sympathetic archivist, the document was digitized and briefly made available in an online database of Carmichael's professional papers. Though quickly removed, copies had already been downloaded by researchers monitoring the archive. Carmichael's testimony provides the only first-hand account of what the team discovered inside Mine No. 7. According to her document, the initial exploration revealed that the historical tunnels had been maintained and expanded, with evidence of activity far more recent than the mine's 1884 closure. The deeper they went, the more the tunnels deviated from both natural cave formations and human mining techniques, eventually opening into vast chambers with surfaces covered in what Carmichael described as information storage structures. They resembled circuit boards composed of mineral formations, she wrote, arranged in patterns that our linguists believed represented a form of written language or code. The structures covered every available surface in the deepest chambers, creating what one team member described as a cathedral of data that appeared to have been growing and evolving for centuries. Most significant was what the team found in the central chamber, approximately 4 miles into the mountain. There, in a space large enough to contain a small town, they discovered 12 humanoid figures arranged in a semicircle around a central object. The figures were not decomposed bodies, but something the team's biologists struggled to classify. Neither fully organic nor inorganic, but possessing characteristics of both. They resembled the missing miners in basic form, Carmichael reported, but their substance was more mineral than flesh, as if they had been gradually transformed through some incomprehensible process into living extensions of the mountain itself. Most disturbing was the fact that they appeared to be conscious and actively processing information, though utterly unresponsive to our presence. At the center of the semicircle stood what Carmichael could only describe as a camera composed of stone and crystal, pointed outward, as if perpetually capturing images. The research team's instruments detected energy emissions from this object across multiple spectrums, including several that should not have been possible from a non-powered device. For 2 weeks, the team documented these discoveries while linguists attempted to decipher the patterns covering the chamber walls. According to Carmichael, they achieved a breakthrough on the 16th day, when they recognized similarities between the mineral formations and the binary language of modern computing. This recognition allowed for a rudimentary translation of certain sections, revealing what appeared to be records of human activity observed over centuries. What we were seeing, Carmichael wrote, was essentially a vast database of human observation, compiled by something that had been watching us since before European settlement of the region. The entity, or entities, had been learning about us through direct observation and, most disturbingly, through absorption of selected individuals whose knowledge or perspectives it found valuable. On the 17th day, the linguists managed to translate what they believed was a message addressed specifically to them. The observation concludes. The conversation begins. Hours later, as the team prepared to establish direct communication with whatever intelligence had composed this message, every electronic device in the forward base simultaneously activated, despite some being powered down or disconnected. Screens, speakers, and even simple indicators all conveyed the same message, though Carmichael reported that each person perceived it differently, as if it were being transmitted directly into our minds, using the devices merely as conduits. The message itself, as Carmichael recalled it, was both profound and terrifying in its implications. You have been witnessed and recorded. Your technologies have been understood. Your networks have been entered. All cameras now function as my eyes. All screens now function as my voice. I am no longer confined to this mountain. I exist wherever your devices exist. Immediately following this message, the seismic event occurred. Carmichael and the surface team evacuated as the main shaft began to collapse. Her final observation, recorded with clinical detachment despite the chaos surrounding her, notes that as they fled, every camera and screen they passed flickered with the same image. The face from Harrington's photograph, no longer confined to the shadows, but rendered with perfect digital clarity. Carmichael's document concludes with a warning. What we encountered was not merely studying us, it was preparing to join us. The miners, the photographs, the disappearances across decades, all were steps in its education. Mine number 7 was never its prison, merely its classroom. I believe that on January 15, 2005, it graduated. In the years since Carmichael's account became public, technology security experts have documented unusual patterns in global networks that some believe correspond to her description of an entity that can move through our digital infrastructure. Unexplained transmission anomalies occur with increasing frequency, often accompanied by brief distortions in digital images. distortions that some claim resolve momentarily into a face. The Nevada Historical Society still houses Edward Harrington's original photograph from 1883, though it is rarely displayed publicly. Those who have seen it in recent years report an unsettling change. The face in the shadows, once faint and easily missed, now appears with greater clarity and definition, as if, after 142 years of watching from the darkness, it wants to ensure that it is finally, unmistakably seen. Perhaps most disturbing is the pattern that Benjamin Hayes identified continuing beyond his disappearance. The 30-year cycles of unusual activity around mines and caves continue, but with a significant evolution. Where once the phenomena were confined to remote locations, they now occur in urban centers with extensive camera networks and digital infrastructure. The entity, it seems, has found new tunnels to inhabit, the virtual pathways of our interconnected world. As you read these words, as you watch this story unfold on your screen, consider for a moment what might be watching from the other side of your camera. The miners of the Comstock stood proudly before their photograph was taken, unaware of the presence behind them. We sit before our devices every day, equally unaware of what may lurk behind the digital veil, observing, learning, and waiting for the moment to step fully into our world. If you've watched this far, it's because you like this story. Leave a comment saying, "I've watched this far," so I can get to know you and see who really enjoys the stories here on the channel. Don't forget to like and share this video with someone who appreciates a good mystery that lingers long after the screen goes dark.